So I'm starting a new series. It's my Is It Overrated series, where I'm going to be taking a look at some of the most popular martial arts, looking at their pros and cons, and trying to decide if it's actually good for real world self-defense and survival situations. And today I'm going to be looking at one of the most popular, if not the most popular martial art today, MMA or mixed martial arts. So if you're ready, feel free to hit that subscribe button, kick back and get ready for a good one. So here we go. So over the past couple of decades, MMA has exploded in popularity. People love it for its intense physicality, its comprehensive combat techniques. While there's no question how good MMA is in a ring, the question is, how efficient is it in the real world in a self-defense situation in the street? So let's go ahead and get into the pros and cons of MMA for self-defense and survival. I'm going to go ahead and examine 4 key points on each side. There's going to be 4 pros and there's going to be 4 cons. And then after that, I'm going to give my general analysis, and you all can feel free to give me more pros or more cons and let me know what you think in the comment section below. So let's go ahead and kick it off for some of the pros of if MMA is actually good for self-defense and survival. Pro number 1, versatility. And by versatility, what I mean by that is versatility ensures that an individual can handle different types of attacks from an opponent, which is going to increase their chances of successfully being able to defend themselves. So MMA's grappling and striking, the fighters are trained extensively in both striking like boxers as well as Muay Thai fighters, as well as grappling like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestlers. That's going to help them out with a variety of combat scenarios. Like a person trained in MMA can handle like an assailant who starts an attack with a punch and then attempts to tackle them to the ground. An MMA fighter is going to be used to dealing with situations like that. Also, MMA is really good with its adaptability. The fact that MMA blends different martial arts makes the practitioners pretty adaptable and capable of changing between standing and ground fighting. For example, like in a bar fight, an MMA trained fighter could switch from defending against a punch to executing a takedown when the situation changes. They also have a really comprehensive skill set, which is going to really help them be very well rounded in different situations. So like during a mugging, an MMA practitioner could use striking to fend off an attacker and grappling to control them if the confrontation were to go to the ground. Pro number 2 for MMA is its physical conditioning. Having good physical conditioning improves an individual's chance to endure the physical demands of a self-defense situation and increases their chance to outlast an attacker. So with strength and endurance, the rigorous training routines of MMA do build significant strength and cardiovascular endurance, which is vital for sustaining efforts for a prolonged confrontation. So like if fight with an aggressor drags on, an MMA trained individual is more likely to outlast their opponent due to their superior conditioning. They also have really good agility and reflexes. Because of the constant sparring and drills, it enhances their agility and their reflexes, helping fighters react quickly to threats. So like when an attacker unexpectedly pulls out a weapon, the quick reflexes of an MMA fighter, because of their training, can help them dodge and counter efficiently. Also, MMA fighters are really resilient. The high intensity nature of MMA training does foster a lot of resilience, both physically and mentally, which is crucial during real world encounter. So like for example, after being struck, an MMA trained fighter can recover faster and continue defending themselves without succumbing to the shock of being hit. Point number 3, realistic combat experience. So by that I mean like realistic combat experience prepares individuals for the shock and intensity of a real situation, making them more effective in defending themselves. And with MMA fighters, they do a lot of full contact sparring, and that can simulate a real fight, conditioning fighters to handle stress as well as the physical impact. So like an MMA fighter used to full contact sparring is less likely to panic when punched in a real altercation. They also have really good pain tolerance because exposure to strikes and submissions in training builds a higher tolerance for pain, which is an advantage in a self-defense situation. So like getting hit or grabbed during a self-defense situation won't easily incapacitate an MMA practitioner who is accustomed to enduring that type of pain. And because of all the training, MMA fighters have a high level of combat readiness. Fighters typically develop a readiness for combat, learning to stay calm and composed during pressure. So in a chaotic situation like a street brawl, an MMA trained individual can maintain composure and apply their training effectively. And finally, point number 4 for the pros side is mental toughness. And by that I mean mental toughness is crucial for staying calm and making smart decisions during a confrontation, which can be the difference between escaping safely and getting harmed. So MMA fighters are disciplined and focused because of their MMA training. It instills discipline and focus, which are essential traits for maintaining and managing stressful situations. So like MMA fighters are really good with their discipline and focus because of their MMA training effectively. So for example, in a threatening scenario, the disciplined mindset of an MMA fighter helps them stay focused on neutralizing the threat rather than panicking. They also have a lot of confidence, which is the confidence gained from mastering various combat skills. This can play a big part in deterring potential attackers because they don't come off as a victim. They come off as a very strong individual. So for example, a confident demeanor bolstered by MMA training can make an attacker think twice before engaging. And lastly is their situational awareness. MMA training often includes drills that enhance situational awareness that'll help the individual identify and avoid threats. So for example, an MMA fighter has a good chance of noticing suspicious behavior or identifying escape routes during a potential threat scenario becomes second nature to someone trained in MMA. Alright, now here we go. This is the part that is going to have y'all coming after me in the comments section. On to the cons. These are 4 things that are going to hold MMA back from being able to be... These are the 4 cons of MMA. Number 1 for the cons, rule-based training. The problem with rule-based training is rule-based training can create habits that are not applicable or even can be detrimental in a real-world fight where anything goes. So the restrictions, MMA training is bound by rules that don't apply in a street fight. So there's no eye gouging, no biting, no groin strikes, potentially limiting the effectiveness. So for example, an attacker in a street fight may use dirty tricks like eye gouging, which an MMA fighter is not trained to handle. Also, sport techniques. Techniques designed for sport may not be practical or safe in uncontrolled real-world environments. For example, a complex submission hold might be effective in a ring, but actually would more than likely be impractical on a hard or uneven surface. Actually, the safety gear too. So training with protective gear doesn't fully prepare fighters for the raw impact of a real fight. And what I mean by that is the absence of gloves and protective padding in a real fight can be a shock to someone who is used to training with safety gear on. Con number 2, its focus on one-on-one combat. Usually self-defense scenarios in the street often involves multiple attackers in unpredictable environments, which are not typically addressed in MMA training. So like with multiple attackers, MMA primarily trains for one-on-one encounters, leaving the practitioner less prepared for situations involving multiple attackers or potentially getting jumped. So for example, facing multiple assailants requires different strategies than those practiced in MMA, like using quick escapes or defensive postures. Also like ambush scenarios. Real-world attacks often involve surprise and deception, elements less emphasized in MMA training. So for example, an MMA fighter may be unprepared for an attacker who strikes suddenly from behind. Like I said, like if you get jumped. Also, environmental factors. The controlled environment of a ring or an MMA gym doesn't replicate the unpredictability of real-world settings such as a confined space, the snow, ice, sand, or uneven terrain. So like fighting in a narrow alley or on a slippery surface requires an adaptation not typically addressed during MMA training. Con number 3 is actually the mindset, that competitive mindset. So like the competitive mindset of an MMA fighter may not align with the primary goal of self-defense, which is to ensure personal safety and escape from danger. So it's like the difference between winning and surviving. MMA fighters are conditioned to win matches, but self-defense prioritizes escaping and surviving over defeating an opponent. So for example, in a self-defense situation, the best option might be to run away rather than engaging in a prolonged fight, but the aggressive approach of an MMA fighter, their aggressive tactics are more suitable for the ring, because in a street fight, it might escalate the situation unnecessarily in a self-defense situation. So for example, responding too aggressively to a verbal altercation could turn a minor confrontation into a violent encounter. Then there's like control versus escape. MMA techniques often aim to control an opponent, whereas self-defense techniques might require quick disengagement or escape. So for example, instead of trying to submit an attacker, quickly disabling them and fleeing might actually be the better, safer choice. And con number 4 is lack of weapon training. Weapons are common in real-world attacks, and a lack of training in weapon defense can be a significant disadvantage in a self-defense situation. So for weapon defense, MMA doesn't typically include training with or against weapons, which is a crucial component for real-world self-defense. For example, an MMA fighter might be at a disadvantage if attacked with a gun or a knife because they lack specific techniques to disarm or avoid the weapon. Also, improvised weapons. Knowing how to use everyday items as improvised weapons is often neglected in MMA as well. So, for example, using a pin, chair, or other objects to defend against an attack is not typically covered in MMA. And then just lack of experience dealing with armed opponents. So for example, an attacker brandishing a weapon may require a completely different defensive strategy than an armed opponent. So my final analysis is this: is MMA overrated for self-defense and survival? I would have to say yes and no, shades of gray. I can't directly say it's overrated, but I will say it's very much incomplete. While MMA offers numerous benefits for self-defense, including its versatility, its physical conditioning, its realistic combat experience, and mental toughness, it also has some significant limitations. Its rule-based training focuses on one-on-one combat. The hyper-competitive mindset, a lack of weapons training can all be drawbacks in real-world scenarios. To fix that, I think it would be beneficial for MMA to have additional training tailored towards real-world threats, just like Krav Maga or certain traditional martial arts that do focus on practical self-defense techniques against weapons. So y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. What are some of your pros that I didn't add? What are some of your cons I didn't add? Do you think that MMA is overrated for self-defense and survival? And if you like this type of content, make sure to subscribe, like, and turn on post notifications. Also, join the Discord community where we will be having much more behind the scenes conversations about this type of stuff and a lot more. And if you want to show some support, swing past my website at urbanwarriorsurvival.com. Link is in the description, and get your free copy of the Urban Warrior Survival Checklist for preppers. And if you're feeling extra supportive, feel free to check out the Urban Warrior shop, where I have listed some personal recommendations for self-defense items, prepping equipment, as well as I have additional custom-made apparel that I designed myself. So with that being said, thanks for tuning in. Tune in next time to see what I'm going to be covering, which martial art is next. Feel free to take some of the quizzes in my short section to see if you can survive and which weapon that you would choose. And thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is B-Rock signing out. Peace.